Good evening and many thanks for joining us. I am Ansmana Iswanyasi and this is QTV News coming to you live from our studios on Caraba Avenue. Here are the main news headlines. At the third edition of the Gambia Women's Chamber of Commerce Annual Women in Business Forum and Award Ceremony, Madam Aissatou Seka-Jah, the Chief Information Officer of QCell Gambia Limited, called for more support for women in STEM and women-led businesses. Over 100 data collectors and supervisors began 5 days training on Monday ahead of the National Survey on Risk Factors to Non-Communicable Diseases. A regional training course on post-disaster needs assessment to enhance disaster recovery capacities is currently underway in Lomé, Togo. And an imam in London Corner, Serekunda, is appealing for assistance after a devastating fire outbreak on Monday caused serious damage to his house and his family's valuables. In international news, after 30 years of a bloody war of independence, 24th of May is the day Eritrea's independence was attained in 1993. Stay tuned as we bring you more on these and other stories. Now, at the third edition of the Gambia Women's Chamber of Commerce Annual Women in Business Forum and Award Ceremony on Wednesday, Madam Aissatou Seka-Jah, the Chief Information Officer of QCell Gambia Limited, called for more support for women in STEM, especially ICT and women-led businesses. More in this report. A leading voice in the drive for women's empowerment in the Gambia, Madam Aissatou Seka-Jah, an ICT specialist, has garnered an admirable reputation over the years for her advocacy for more support for women in ICT. Through the philanthropic arm of the Q Group, Madam Jah has spearheaded several initiatives such as the awarding of scholarships to deserving students, especially young girls from underprivileged families, to study ICT at university. As chief guest speaker at this forum, Madam Jah paid tribute to Gambian women, especially those engaged in business, for their selfless service to country, an immense contribution to national development. And she went on to highlight the need for more women to embrace ICT, adding that the time has come to bridge the gender gap in the digital sphere.
From the woman farmer to the market woman, from the agro-food processors to the caterers, from the petty traders to the general merchandise vendors, from the craft makers to the fashion designers, from the tour operators to the event planners, from the fintech entrepreneurs to the large-scale business owners, women in Gambia continue to make strides in business. To all of you, we are very proud of you. We say, well done.
Nafi Bari, President of the Gambia Women's Chamber of Commerce, Fatou Kinte, Minister for Gender, Women, Children and Social Welfare, and Lumana Thomas, Program Manager for Employment and Trade at the EU Gambia Office, all highlighted women's contribution to the advancement of the country's business sector.
Our mission is to firmly establish our role as a leading business support organization for women in more strategic approach. We will work towards a broad and inclusive agenda that reflects our country while attracting and uplifting new and diverse members in our programs all over the Gambia.
This occasion signifies the important role that women continue to play in the socio-economic development of our country. Therefore, recognizing their efforts by saying thank you to such an award ceremony will further encourage them and boost their morale. And I want to say a big thank you to GWCC for saying thank you to our women for their hard work.
The EU remains committed to support initiatives willing to tackle discriminations, inequality, and social injustice, which undermine development efforts. The role of women in our societies and economies is crucial. Most of the potential for a country's economic growth, innovation, health, and education lies in the hands of women, especially in a country such as the Gambia, with its economy being characterized by players in the informal sector, with women playing a pivotal role.
This national convergence of women in business is organized by the Gambia Women's Chamber of Commerce to create a platform for networking opportunities for women entrepreneurs. It is also organized to celebrate successful women-led business, hence the awarding of several women at the event, including Aja Fatoumata Jah, who received a Lifetime Award. Answana Isonyasi for KTV News. Now, over 100 data collectors and supervisors began 5 days training on Monday ahead of the National Survey on Risk Factors to Non-Communicable Diseases. The training is organized by the Ministry of Health in collaboration with the World Health Organization. Oliam Kamara tells us more.
According to officials from the Ministry of Health, the training is a significant milestone in their efforts to reduce the burden of non-communicable diseases, which accounts for 34% of the total annual mortality in the country. The participants consist of health workers and non-health workers. According to Mohamed Lamin Jaite, the Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Health, going by the latest evidence on NCD, the cardiovascular disease accounts for the highest proportion of NCD-related mortality, followed by cancers, chronic respiratory diseases, diabetes, and other NCDs accounting for 14%, 4%, 2%, 1%, and 12% respectively.
The prevalence of these risk factors is also disturbingly high among the population. What we knew in 2010, when the first WHO STEPS survey was conducted in the Gambia with the support of the WHO organization, was that 15.6% of our adults aged 25 to 64 smoked tobacco. 22.6% were not physically active, 1.2% drank alcohol, that adults aged 20 years and above consume about 8 grams of salt per day, exceeding the WHO recommended threshold of less than 5 grams per day.
Dr. Fatoumata Diba, Assistant Director of Health Services at the Ministry of Health, says the last time the Ministry of Health conducted a stepwise survey was in 2010, and the data from this survey will be very crucial in guiding the ministry towards the formation of evidence-based interventions.
For that reason, I would kindly urge everyone participating in this survey, from the principal investigator, the supervisors, the data collectors, to make sure that they do their best.
Non-communicable diseases are the leading cause of premature death globally. Every year, 41 million people die from heart attacks, stroke, cancer, chronic respiratory diseases, diabetes, or a mental disorder. Dr. Desta Turini is the WHO country representative.
All know that without the required data or evidence, the fight against NCDs will be very difficult. We will not know where we are going, so we have to measure. And if we measure, we know how much we have done, whether we are not doing well or we are doing well. So we know that an exercise of this nature requires huge financial and other resources. So we would like to really highly appreciate and commend the World Bank for generously providing financial resources for this survey.
It is hoped that at the end of the 5 days training, participants will be fully equipped with the knowledge to effectively conduct the NCD surveys on risk factors to non-communicable diseases. For QTV News, Lolly M. Kamara.
Now, a regional training on post-disaster needs assessment is currently underway in Lomé, Togo, to enhance disaster recovery capacities and establish resilient recovery practices in the 15 ECOWAS member states. QTV's Jennifer Sonko is an attendee and filed this report.
This high-level training will also contribute to strengthening the post-disaster needs assessment and disaster recovery framework roster of experts hosted by the ECOWAS Commission. Disaster needs assessments represent a harmonized and coordinated approach, providing for an objective, comprehensive and government-led assessment of post-disaster damages. The ECOWAS sub-region, compared with 6 other economic regions of Africa, was ranked at the highest risk of exposure, vulnerability disability and population affected by disasters between 2015 and 2018. Over the last 2 decades, recovery has become an increasingly specialized area of practice. Several tools and methodologies have evolved to assist the process of the recovery and reconstruction. The question is, how can this training on post-disaster needs assessment change this narrative? Mohammed Ibrahim, head of Division Humanitarian Affairs and Disaster Risk Reduction at the ECOWAS Commission, explains.
Sustainability, yes, because what we are doing presently is to develop a roster, because these experts here, we're going to have the database which will form the roster of experts, and they're going to form like a community of practitioners, expert practitioners, and that roster will be updated regularly when there is need for deployment.
Within the ECOWAS region, floods and droughts persist as the most severe hazards, affecting nearly 100 million people between 1977 and 2018. In September 2022, the Gambia experienced its worst flooding of nearly 40 years, affecting infrastructure and livelihoods displacement, affecting over 40,000 people. Hudul E.N. Kuli is the National Disaster Management Coordinator for the Upper River region.
Yeah, it will be a kind of strengthening knowledge of the National Disaster Management Agency when it comes to post-disaster needs assessment. We have to recognize the fact that climate change is inevitable, and so in as much as climate change is inevitable, we are a vulnerable nation where we have vulnerable societies within the country. And so this vulnerability will lead to disasters affecting people based on the certain criteria or certain phenomena. One will be the poverty status of the people. The other issue will be like disasters caused naturally, and of course human-induced disasters. So the training will build a capacity of the nation to look at those issues in detail.
The complexity of recovering from the impact of these hazards in the ECOWAS region is exacerbated by its security context that is shaped by fragility, conflict and violence. Sabia Tubakar is an environmental safeguard specialist from Sierra Leone.
It's a privilege and an opportunity for me to be part of this post-disaster needs assessment training, because we all are aware of the disasters, especially West African face. So being part of this training is an open eye and building my capacity and knowledge to know what to do when there's a disaster and after a disaster.
West African countries are finding it extremely difficult to deal with recurrent disasters as well as conflicts. Now, according to a research conducted by DARA, the disaster risk reduction index for West African countries is very, very low. Now, this training on post-disaster recovery needs assessment is hoped that we'll be able to build the capacities of these experts to the extent of changing this current narrative. Reporting for QTV News from Lomé, Togo, I am Jennifer Sonko.
And a report there by Jennifer Sonko will lead us to the commercial break, but the news continues when we return.
Inco Home Choice. Home Choice. Bagage bu baax mooy def liggéey bu baax te wóor te soo ko jëndee dina la yóbbu ci diir bu yàgg te du gaaw a yàqu. Inco Home Choice ñoo leen indil bépp xeetu bagage yi jumtuwaay yi ngeen mun a jëfandikoo ci seeni métier yi.
waaw ñun Inco fii leen day jëndee suñu bagage yi Inco lañ yombalee bagage yi dañ over baax quality bagage lañ lay jaay moo tax ñun liggéey bu ñoo def electrical plumbing boobu ji Inco fii leen day ñëw Brikama ñu jënd suñu bagage ñu bàyyi ko ba ci Kustaan Serekunda fii waaye fii leen day ñëwee bagage dina bagage lu waral loolu Inco dañ yombalee bagage number 1 number 2 seen bagage yi dañ over baax dañ over quality
bagage yu si mel ni power tools accessories bench tools generator yu baax welding machines ak small construction equipments muy bagage yu baax yi ngeen mën a jëfandikoo bu ngeen ay samp ay kër.
Because Inco mo fene la bagage quality sa garantie bi la bagage ñaasa ni mi sa tije ni ta famo min na Inco ma soto janga man Gambia janga ma soto folo den nga ñoo ma ko akolera ñaawo ñandi Being a willing and inko bagaso san.
Seet si leen ñu si suñ maakaan yi nekk ci biir réew mi foofa sa Jimpex Kanifing Sukuta Jabang traffic light ak Birkama opposite Joko night club wala ngeen call ñu ci 532 5773 wala 341 7619 wala 739 8863 wala 303 9300 wala nga email ñu incogambia@gmail.com ak Inco Home Choice jafe-jafe ci wàllu bagage yi ngeen di jëfandikoo ci seen métier yi jeex na. Inco Home Choice. Inco Home Choice.
Hi, my name is Victor Lindelof.
My name is Maya Lindelof.
And we are proud UNICEF Sweden Goodwill Ambassadors.
And right now we are in the Gambia to look at UNICEF's work here in the Gambia, and it's been truly inspiring.
When our 2 sons were born, we made the very important decision to get them vaccinated to protect them from diseases.
And right now we are in Gunjur in the Gambia, and we really want to tell all of you parents out there that live in this beautiful country to take vaccination seriously.
So during this campaign, please get vaccinated to protect your child and yourself.
Welcome back, and be reminded you're following QTV News coming to you live from our studios on Caraba Avenue. Now, Imam Sana Samura of London Corner, Serekunda, is appealing for assistance after a devastating fire outbreak on Monday evening caused serious damage to his house, destroying 4 rooms and all of his family's valuables, leaving them without shelter, food or clothing. I visited the family, and this is my report. He left his house to lead Asr prayers on Monday evening, only to return home 15 minutes later to a shocking sight that is likely to have a devastating impact on his family for a long time. 4 rooms and all their belongings were consumed by the fire. And Imam Sana Samura says without the intervention of his neighbors, the inferno may have caused more damage. As soon as I approached the house, I heard screams, then saw the flames. I was devastated. We lost all our belongings. As I speak to you, we are without shelter, food, or even clothing. I am the head of an extended family, so you can imagine what I am dealing with. It's a terrible situation. I am asking for help from the public. Dambai, a neighbor and family friend who was with the Imam at the time of the incident, described the occurrence as sad and devastating, adding that it has brought sorrow and pain to Imam Samura's family.
Filan talk man ak imam bin nané ataya ba paré ñu nan force imam nima time de jotna ñu japp.
I was here chatting with the Imam. We brewed green tea and then went to the mosque to pray. I was devastated when we got here. It all happened within minutes. As I speak to you, they don't even have food. So you can imagine how difficult this situation is for the family. We thank God there were no casualties, but the loss is so bad that they don't even have clothes or food to eat. Dambai also appeals for support from the public.
Ñom ay imam lañu te imam ku na xamna ni dolem amunu dara amunu salaire amunu dara.
We all know that most imams are not financially strong. They are not paid salaries, nor do they run big businesses. And this makes Imam Samura's situation even more painful. So I am calling on fellow Muslims and anyone who can help to please come to their aid. The family has lost everything. Please help. Though the cause of the fire is unknown, what is clear is that for this extended family, this is a monumental loss that will require a lot of support to overcome. With no shelter, food or clothing, the family now relies on the benevolence of neighbors for their survival. Ansmane Sonyasi for KTV News. Well, our prayers and thoughts are with Imam Samura and his family during these difficult times, and we hope they get the much needed support. And we now take a look at international news in a moment. Now, after 30 years of a bloody war of independence, 24th of May is the day Eritrea's independence was realized in 1993, proclaiming to the world that they had liberated their homeland from Ethiopian colonization and emerged as a newly born sovereign nation. Lena Ikwenyiba reports.
An independence referendum was held in Eritrea between 23rd and 25th April 1993, after the war with Ethiopia, which had ended in 1991. At the time, the country was recognized by the rest of the world as being part of Ethiopia. The result was 99.83% in favor, with a 98.5% turnout. Independence from Ethiopia was declared on 27 April 1993. On May 24, 1993, the Eritrean People's Liberation Front forces moved into the capital city of Asmara and reinstated independence after a war that had raged for nearly 3 decades against the Ethiopian military regime, becoming one of the few African countries that was colonized by another African country. Here is the moment the independence was announced. This day marked the conclusion of a lengthy and turbulent liberation struggle dating back to the 1800s. Italy seized control of the coastal highlands of Eritrea and proclaimed it an Italian colony known as Italian Eritrea. During the Battle of Keren in 1941, the Italians were defeated by the British, who then assumed control of the country's administration, which lasted until approximately 1950. When they proposed dividing the country into 2 portions, one controlled by Britain and the other by Ethiopia, ignoring Eritrea's demand for independence. This led to a prolonged war of independence in which women were very much involved. This movement had 1/3 of women participating, which was 30% more than most liberation movements around the world. After defeating Ethiopian forces, Isaias Afwerki, who declared their independence, was elected president and chairman of parliament. His Eritrean People's Front for Democracy and Justice, previously the Eritrean People's Liberation Front, established a one-party state in which national, legislative and presidential elections have never been held. As such, it is the only party that has ever governed Eritrea. Independence festivals in Eritrea last an entire week with various activities that include carnivals, street performances, concerts, parades, tent parties and flag waving. Despite its political isolation, by 2015 it was the only African country on track to meet the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. Reporting for QTV News, I am Lena Igwenyiba.
And also in international news, in what is described as a war that seems to be escalating, Sudan's warring factions continue to fight each other even after the latest attempt at a ceasefire brokered by the USA and Saudi Arabia. Alicia tells us more.
The 2 warring parties continue to disregard the ceasefires brokered by mediators, the latest being the 7-day truce agreed late on Monday. The truce mediated by the US and Saudi Arabia is the first to have been signed by representatives of the parties. Nonetheless, witnesses quoted by news agencies said there were strikes and clashes shortly after the latest ceasefire in Khartoum, Omdurman and Bari. Sudan's armed forces and the powerful paramilitary rapid support forces continue to face off in the capital, Khartoum. The war started on April 15th and thousands have fled the country for safety. Hundreds killed and foreign diplomatic missions have shut down in Sudan. It is triggered by past struggle between the leaders of the warring parties. While thanking the US and Saudi Arabia for brokering the ceasefire agreement, RSF commander Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo said his forces won't retreat until it ends what he calls a coup, in reference to the armed forces attack against his troops. He vowed to return Sudan to democracy and hold to account those who have committed crimes against the Sudanese. The army is relying on airstrikes to remove the RSF forces from strategic locations to no avail. The paramilitary is reported to be using civilian buildings as cover, leading to many injuries being sustained by civilians. One Khartoum resident, Mahmoud Salah, told AFP News that there were fighter jets bombing his neighborhood. We feel like we will die today Salma Abdallah, a resident of Al Riyadh neighborhood in Khartoum, told Reuters news agency. According to the UN's envoy to Sudan, Volker Perthes, fighting and troop movement continued into Tuesday. In a worrying sign, the UN Special Envoy, Volker, warned the Security Council that the war was taking on a tribal dimension. The U.S. has announced $245 million in humanitarian aid to Sudan and neighboring states, which are bearing the brunt of the refugee crisis triggered by the conflict. However, unless the ceasefire is respected by both parties, the humanitarian aid will not meet many of the intended beneficiaries. Reporting for QTV News, I am Aliou Cissé.
And this is where we draw the curtains on this bulletin. But before we take a leave of you, here's a recap for main headlines. At the third edition of the Gambia Women's Chamber of Commerce annual Women in Business Forum and Award ceremony, Madam Aissatou Seka, the Chief Information Officer of QCell Gambia Limited, called for more support for women in STEM and women-led businesses. Over 100 data collectors and supervisors began 5 days training on Monday ahead of the national survey on risk factors to non-communicable diseases. A regional training course on post-disaster needs assessment to enhance disaster recovery capacities is currently underway in Lome, Togo. Imam Sana Samura of London Corner, Serekunda, is appealing for assistance after a devastating fire outbreak on Monday caused serious damage to his house and his family's valuables. And in international news, after 30 years of a bloody war of independence, 24th of May is the day Eritrea's independence was attained in 1993. That's all we have for you in this bulletin. Do join us at 10 p.m. for more news. Until then, thanks for watching.